Mom told me to stay quiet at dinner. Her dad's a judge, don't embarrass us. Then the judge stopped mid-toast, walked straight to me, and asked the whole table, does anyone here know who she actually is? The second Richard Calloway's eyes landed on mine across that dining room, I watched my mother's entire life's work begin to crack. Not loudly, not all at once. The way ice fractures under pressure, a hairline split, almost imperceptible, running straight through the center of something she'd spent 34 years building with extraordinary, exhausting care. He stopped mid-step. The room was mid-laugh, mid-sip, mid-sentence. The comfortable noise of a dinner party in full swing. 7 people arranged around my mother's best china, her best candles, her best version of a perfect family. Bradley was holding court at the head of the table, doing the thing he does where he leans back just slightly and lets his voice carry like he's already won whatever argument hasn't started yet. Patricia, my mother, though calling her that sometimes requires a small internal effort, was refreshing water glasses she'd filled 2 minutes ago because Patricia always needs something to do with her hands when she's performing. And then Richard Calloway stopped. He was maybe 4 steps from his chair, jacket still buttoned, silver hair catching the candlelight, and he stopped the way a man stops when his brain and his feet have a disagreement. His wife Margaret kept moving for a half step before she realized. His daughter Nora, Bradley's fiancée, the reason for all of this, glanced up from her phone. Everyone felt it before anyone understood it. Richard Calloway looked at me. "Hello," he said, and his voice had the particular quality of a man who is very rarely surprised. "I'm surprised to see you here." Then quieter. "Who are you to them exactly?" 6 words, and the room went absolutely, perfectly, terrifyingly silent. I looked at my mother. Her smile was still there, frozen at the corners, the way a candle looks right after you blow it out, the shape of the flame, but no more light behind it. I folded my hands in my lap. I kept my face very still, and I thought, 34 years. Let's see if it was worth it. Here's what you need to know about Patricia Townsend. She is, by any reasonable measure, a gifted woman, organized to the point of architecture, the kind of person who irons pillowcases, alphabetizes her spice rack, and sends birthday cards that arrive on the actual birthday, not the day before, not the day after. She volunteered at the school library for 6 years. She has never, not once in my memory, been visibly flustered in front of company. She also has an Instagram account she started 2 years ago, Patricia and Family, that has 847 followers and 0 photographs of me. Not one. I checked. I counted. My brother Bradley is 31, 3 years younger than me, and he sells mid-range sedans at a dealership in Fairfax. He's good at it. He has the easy, unremarkable handsomeness of a catalog model, a laugh that shows all his teeth, and a talent for making people feel like they've gotten a deal when they haven't. He genuinely loves our mother, which I've always thought was either his greatest virtue or the most consequential thing that ever happened to him, depending on the day. My mother tells people he's a regional sales director. She tells people I dropped out of school and moved away. I graduated top of my class from Georgetown Law. I have been a federal litigation attorney at Whitfield and Keene for 8 years. I have argued 17 cases. I have won 14 of them. 3 of those wins required overturning precedent. I am 34 years old, and I have a nameplate on an office door in a building 12 minutes from my childhood bedroom. My mother has never told a single one of her friends. I've tried to understand it over the years. In the way you try to understand something that doesn't make rational sense but keeps happening anyway. You just keep turning it over, looking for the angle that makes it coherent. The best theory I have is this. Patricia needed Bradley to be exceptional. She needed it in the specific, consuming way some parents need their children to be extensions of a better version of themselves. And Bradley, kind, easy, car-selling Bradley, wasn't exceptional enough on his own, so she needed me to be less accomplished, less present, less real. I was the negative space she carved out to make his shape look larger. I'd accommodated it, more or less. Stopped mentioning work at family events, stopped correcting her when she introduced me as living up in DC, let holidays pass without incident, kept my voice level during her little digs, chose my battles with the cold pragmatism of someone who learned early that fighting in a rigged courtroom is a waste of your best arguments. But she called me at 2:14 a.m. on a Thursday. I was asleep. I hadn't spoken to her in 6 weeks. I stared at the phone ringing in the dark for a full 4 seconds before I answered it. "Tomorrow," she said. "No hello. No sorry for waking you. Bradley's fiancé's family is coming for dinner. You can come, but keep your mouth shut." I sat up. "Why?" "Her father is a federal judge. Don't embarrass us. You always do." I should have asked which judge. I genuinely wish I had asked which judge, not because it would have changed anything I decided to do, but because the conversation that would have followed would have been extraordinary. Instead, I just sat in the dark with my phone and smiled at nothing. "Got it," I said. She hung up first. I arrived at 6:45, 15 minutes early, because I'd learned a long time ago that arriving before the other guests was the only way to claim any actual information about what I was walking into. Patricia met me at the door in a cream blouse and new pearl earrings, the kind of earrings you buy specifically for an occasion you've been planning. She walked me through the house the way a stage director walks an actor through blocking, the table configuration, who sat where, the things she'd told people about Bradley, the things she'd told people about herself. She stopped at the hallway mirror, adjusted something invisible in her reflection, and said, "If anyone asks what you do, office administration, paperwork, nothing special." "Mom, I'm a lawyer." She turned to face me. Something moved across her expression. Not quite guilt, not quite contempt. Something older and more tired than either. "This is Bradley's night," she said. "Can you not make everything about yourself for once?" I looked at her for a moment. She looked back. Then she turned and walked to the kitchen, and I followed, and I found my seat at the table, far corner, one chair removed from the door to the kitchen, and I sat down and I thought about a specific thing I'd learned in my second year of practice from a senior partner named Diane Holloway, who had 30 years and a reputation that made judges sit up straighter. Diane had told me, the most powerful thing you can do in a courtroom is wait, let the other side talk. Let them arrange their evidence, make their case, reveal their assumptions. You will learn more from 60 seconds of silence than 60 minutes of argument. So I waited. I unfolded my napkin. I put my phone on silent. I poured myself half a glass of water. I waited for the Calloways. They arrived at 7 o'clock exactly. I heard the doorbell, heard my mother's transformed voice, that particular register she reserves for guests she's trying to impress, half an octave warmer, somehow slightly British, and heard Bradley's laugh from the foyer, then footsteps, and the dining room door opened, and they came in. Richard Calloway entered first. I recognized him, not in the gradual, uncertain way you recognize someone you've met briefly at a party. The immediate, precise, no ambiguity recognition of a face you've looked at from 12 feet away while under oath. Silver hair, close-cropped, square jaw, the particular posture of a man who has spent decades behind a bench, not stiff, not military, but settled, like someone who decided a long time ago exactly how much space he was entitled to take up and has been comfortable with that amount ever since. Federal Judge Richard Calloway, 18th Circuit, 11 years on the bench before that, Assistant U.S. Attorney, the kind of judge other lawyers mention by last name alone, the way you'd reference a weather system. Calloway ruled last month. Calloway doesn't tolerate that. If it goes to Calloway, bring your best. He'd presided over 2 of my cases. I'd won both. My face stayed entirely neutral. I am 8 years into a career that requires performing composure under conditions specifically engineered to destroy it. And in that moment, I understood, with sudden and almost physical clarity, why my mother hadn't asked which judge. She hadn't thought it mattered. Of course she hadn't. Because in the world Patricia Townsend had built and maintained with such dedicated, relentless craft, the world where I was nobody, where I handled paperwork, where I had no presence worth accounting for, the idea that her erased daughter might have a professional relationship with the distinguished guest would have been literally unimaginable. Richard Calloway moved through the introductions. His wife Margaret, gracious and warm, with the specific intelligence of someone who has spent years watching people perform for her husband. Their daughter Nora, Bradley's Nora, who was lovely in a low-key way, the kind of woman who seems quietly certain of things, which made me think she might be the best thing that had ever happened to my brother. Then Patricia turned to Richard with her most radiant smile. "This is my son Bradley, Regional Sales Director. We're so proud." Bradley shook Richard's hand with exactly the grip he'd practiced. I could tell because I'd seen him practice it. Then Patricia turned to me. Her voice shifted, lighter, faster, slightly quieter, the vocal equivalent of fine print. "And this is Amelia. She works in an office up in DC." Richard Calloway took my hand and stopped. The handshake didn't end. He just held it. 1 beat past the normal duration, then 2, and his brow did the thing. The small, precise furrow of a man whose mind has just encountered a fact that doesn't align with its current model. "Townsend," he said slowly, testing the word, weighing it. My mother laughed. Too bright, too sudden, a note slightly off-key. "Okay, everyone, let's sit." But Richard looked back at me as she steered him away. 3 full seconds of eye contact. Even, measured, considering. The look of a man who files things away carefully and retrieves them precisely. I sat down. I put my hands in my lap. I waited. Dinner proceeded as Patricia had orchestrated it. She narrated every dish with the enthusiasm of someone who needs you to understand that nothing about this evening is accidental. The lamb was sourced from a specific farm. The wine was from a vineyard Bradley had supposedly visited. The centerpiece, she mentioned twice, was assembled by hand. Between narrations, she redirected conversations with the skill of someone who had been doing it for decades. A question about DC would get halfway across the table before she'd intercept it, pivot it back toward Bradley's territory, keep the geography of the conversation carefully managed. She sent me to the kitchen twice, once for a serving dish that was already on the counter, once for a different kind of spoon. Errands for their own sake. Small, deniable disappearances. Bradley, for his part, settled into the role he'd been handed. Between bites, between sips, with the comfortable ease of someone narrating their own mythology. Amelia was such a weird kid. Always thought she was smarter than everyone. He said it with a laugh, the kind of laugh that asks you to laugh too, that retroactively classifies the thing as a joke depending on your reaction. My mother put her hand to her chest. Thank goodness she settled down. I said nothing. I cut my lamb. I took a sip of wine. I ran a mental inventory of the documentation I'd been collecting for years without ever quite knowing why. Cards my mother had sent that never mentioned my work. A voicemail from 2 Christmases ago when she'd introduced me to a family friend as Between Things. A screenshot of her Instagram account search results when you typed my name. No results found. 8 years of federal courtrooms taught me exactly how to sit inside a silence designed to bury you. The key is to let it feel like patience. Let the other side mistake your stillness for defeat. Across the table, Richard Calloway had been doing what judges always do. Watching. Not obtrusively, not theatrically. Just that particular quality of attention that is its own kind of authority. Quick pause. If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify's linked in the description. He asked Bradley questions about the car business with apparent interest. He was warm with Nora in the uncomplicated way of a father who has figured out how to show up. He complimented my mother's lamb. him. But twice, during pauses, his eyes moved to me. Brief, assessing. I could see him working it out. Then he picked up his water glass, held it, set it down. He picked up his dinner knife and tapped the edge of his crystal wine glass, once, with a clean, precise ring. The table quieted. Patricia's hands came together. Her expression resolved into something beatific. This was the moment she'd wanted. The moment she'd planned the flowers for, selected the earrings for, arranged the seating for. The distinguished judge raising a toast to her golden son. Richard stood. He buttoned his jacket, the small, habitual gesture of a man about to address a room. He began to speak, and then he began to walk, slowly, around the table, and the words were warm and general, something about families and occasions, and everyone's attention tracked with him. And then it became clear, unmistakably, undeniably clear, that he was not walking toward Bradley. He was walking toward me. He stopped, right beside my chair. The room did not go gradually quiet. It went immediately quiet, the way rooms do when something shifts in the fundamental register of what's happening. "I have to say," he said, and his voice was conversational, almost gentle, "I'm surprised to see you here." Patricia's laugh came fast, sharp, a sound like something being caught before it falls. "Oh, Amelia is my daughter. Of course she'd be here." Richard didn't look at her. He looked at me. "Who are you to them exactly?" 6 words, entirely reasonable on the surface. The kind of question a man asks when he wants the answer, not the answer he's been given, but the actual answer. Nobody spoke. Nobody, as far as I could tell, was even breathing. Bradley's wine glass had stopped halfway to his mouth at some point in the last 10 seconds and hadn't moved since. Nora was watching her father with an expression I recognized, the look of someone who has just understood that they've been watching a performance without knowing it was one. Margaret's hand was on the table, very still. Richard's voice, when he continued, was the voice I'd heard from a bench 12 feet above a courtroom floor. Not unkind, not theatrical. Final, in the way that some voices just are. I remember every attorney who argues before my bench. The fracture my mother had been suppressing for the last hour opened. Her smile was still on her face. The muscles were still holding it, but something behind it had gone completely dark. "Counselor Townsend appeared before me twice," Richard said. "She won both cases." Margaret's hand went to her mouth. Nora turned to me, eyes wide, a dawning look. Bradley's wine glass finally completed its journey to the table, not gently. And my mother, Patricia Townsend, who had spent 34 years arranging a version of reality in which I was small enough to be useful, who had built an altar to her son out of the carefully quarried stone of my erasure, stared at Richard Calloway like the floor had opened beneath her feet. Richard turned to me. "Counselor," he said, "would you like to clarify?" I looked at my mother, her perfect lipstick, the pearl earrings, the candles she'd chosen, the centerpiece she'd assembled by hand. 34 years. Every Christmas, every phone call, every introduction made in a lighter, faster voice like a footnote. Every conversation redirected before it could land anywhere near me. Every neighbor told I'd gone away. Every Instagram post. My hands were not shaking. That was the thing I noticed, that I had expected. The adrenaline tremor, the racing pulse, the way your body tries to make a courtroom out of a dining room and floods you with the chemistry of it. But my hands were completely still, because this wasn't a courtroom. In a courtroom, the stakes belong to someone else. You carry them, but they're not yours. A client's freedom, a family's settlement, a precedent that will outlast the case. That weight is real, and it's enormous, and it teaches you a particular discipline. The discipline of containing your own emotion completely so that it can do its work somewhere useful. This was different. This was mine. I looked at my mother for 5 full seconds. She looked back. I think she was still hoping, even then, that I would do what I had always done, what 34 years of training had prepared me to do. Smooth it over. Deflect. Let the moment pass. Give her the out she didn't deserve and pretend it was grace. I said, "It's true." My voice didn't shake. "I'm a federal litigation attorney. I've been at Whitfield & Keene for 8 years. I specialize in federal civil rights litigation." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I had my phone there, as I always do. I opened my email. I found the message I'd been carrying around for 2 years. Not as a weapon, never as a weapon, just as proof for myself on the days when Patricia's version of reality started to feel more solid than my own. It was dated 18 months ago. Subject line, Townsend versus Hargrove Manufacturing, post-argument. It was a note from Richard Calloway's clerk, forwarding something the judge had said in chambers following my oral argument. I read it aloud. "Counselor Townsend demonstrated an exceptional command of the procedural record and a rare ability to redirect complex statutory argument under direct judicial questioning. It is this court's view that she is among the more capable appellate advocates to appear before this bench in recent terms." I set my phone down. The silence was different now. Not the held breath silence of before. The stunned, waiting, what is happening silence. This was something else. The silence after a verdict. The silence that has a shape. Nora was the first person to speak. "You're a federal attorney?" Her voice was entirely genuine. Not performing surprise. Actually surprised. I had no idea. "Most people here don't," I said. I looked at Bradley. He was staring at the table. A muscle in his jaw was working. I'd known that jaw for 31 years, and I knew what it looked like when he was angry and what it looked like when he was ashamed, and right now it looked like shame, which surprised me more than I expected. He knew. I realized that in the moment, he'd always known, at some level. You can't share a childhood with someone and be entirely unaware of what they became. He'd let it happen. He'd participated in it. But he'd also, I think, believed what Patricia needed him to believe, that I didn't mind, or that it it wasn't really happening, or that I was fine. The architecture of convenient self-deception is always load-bearing. My mother hadn't moved. She was sitting very straight. The smile had finally left her face. Not dissolved, not crumbled, just gone, like a program closing. What was underneath it was harder to read than I'd expected. Not the guilt I'd imagined in various versions of this moment over the years. Something older. Something that looked, honestly, like exhaustion. Richard Calloway settled back into his chair. He poured himself a measured half-inch of wine and said, in the tone of a man closing a proceeding, "Well, I think that's the most interesting dinner party revelation I've had in quite some years." Margaret, beside him, made a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been the release of a tension she'd been holding since the handshake. Nora reached across the table, not toward Bradley, toward me. She touched my hand briefly. "I'm glad you came," she said. I stayed another 40 minutes, not for drama, not to watch anything unfold further, or to prolong whatever the moment had been. I stayed because leaving immediately would have felt like running, and I was done running from this table. The conversation reconfigured. It does that. When the premise of an evening collapses, the pieces rearrange themselves around a new center of gravity. Richard asked me about the Hargrove case, which is now precedent in the Fourth Circuit. We talked for 20 minutes about appellate procedure and the particular challenges of building a record at the district level that can survive appeal. It was, I want to be clear, an entirely normal professional conversation, the kind I have regularly, the kind my mother had spent years ensuring would never happen in her presence. Bradley disappeared into the kitchen at some point. I heard Patricia follow him. I didn't follow either of them. When I finally stood to leave, Richard Calloway shook my hand, properly this time with the full weight of actual recognition, and said, "Whitfield and Keene. I'll keep that in mind," which, in the language of federal judges, is a remarkable thing to say. Margaret hugged me, actually hugged me, the way warm women who have been watching something unjust finally corrected sometimes do, with feeling, briefly, without making it about themselves. Nora walked me to the door. "She does this a lot?" she asked quietly. "Every version of this." Yes. She was quiet for a moment. "I love Bradley," she said finally, "but I'm not going to do this." I looked at her. I believed her completely. "Good," I said. My mother texted me at 11:47 that night. I was home, in bed, with the specific hollow bone tiredness that comes after a long sustained performance finally ends. Not unhappy, not triumphant exactly, just quiet. The way a room gets quiet after something important happens in it. The text said, "I hope you're satisfied." I read it twice. I put my phone face down. I thought about a lot of things in the dark. I thought about Diane Holloway, who told me once that the thing she'd never gotten comfortable with in 30 years of litigation was the part after the verdict. The part where you have to keep living in the world with the people you just defeated. She said it didn't matter if you were right. The world keeps turning and the people stay in it. I thought about Bradley's face when he was looking at the table, the shame in his jaw. I thought about the Instagram account with 847 followers and 0 photographs. I thought about what my mother looked like under the smile when it was finally gone. Tired, just tired. 3 months later, I was a witness at Bradley and Nora's engagement party. A real one, smaller, at a restaurant in the city. Nora had insisted on it. She'd had, from what Bradley told me in the single honest conversation we'd had since the dinner, a very direct set of conversations with both of them about what their family was going to look like going forward. She'd used the word documentation with my mother, apparently. Evidence of a pattern. I liked her enormously. My mother introduced me to Nora's aunt that night. "This is my daughter, Amelia," she said. "She's an attorney, federal litigation. She's very good." Her voice was level, careful, not warm. That would have been too much, too fast. And Patricia Townsend is nothing if not precise about what she can actually deliver. But she said it. The aunt said, "How impressive," and moved on, and my mother moved on, and the party continued. I stood with my wine glass and I didn't say anything, because some victories don't announce themselves. They just quietly rearrange the furniture. And some nights, after 34 years of being the footnote in someone else's story, you get to be the entire point. Not because you planned a confrontation, or built toward revenge, or arranged things to humiliate anyone, but because a man with silver hair and a good memory simply stopped, looked at you across a dining room and said, "I know exactly who you are," and this time, there was no one fast enough to speak over it.